Good morning, all of you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, ma'am.
All
Good
right.
morning, ma'am.
Yes, good morning. In the last class, we started with a new chapter in history, the national movement, and we just did a little bit of the introduction that means under the Britishers for more than 100 years and being exploited in all the fields and all sections of Indian society, being dissatisfied and discontented with the British rule, and because the Britishers, they simply treated India as a colony, took raw materials from here at a cheap price, sent them to Britain, finished the goods, and again send here the finished goods and sold them at high prices, thereby making huge profits. And so entire resources of the country were being controlled by the Britishers, and the Indians realized by this time that India could not be for the Indians till the time the Britishers had this control over resources and over a country. So it's time that we oust the Britishers from the country. And then we also had to look that during 1880s some political associations they came to be established in India, and then we also had a look that during the 1870s and the 1880s, that dissatisfaction against the British rule, it grew more, it intensified, and during in 1878 we have the Arms Act and the Vernacular Press Act being passed, which showed the exploitative nature and the discriminative nature of the Britishers. Then we also had a look at the Ilbert Bill, that and the people of India, they came to understand when this bill was taken back, that they could never expect equality from the Britishers, and the Britishers did not treat them as equals, but discriminated them. And so now the need was felt for an all India political and all Indian political organization, and so we saw that in 1885 the Indian National Congress was established by A.O. Hume, Alan Octavian Hume, along with a few other prominent Indians. And earlier the Britishers also took an active part in the working of the Congress, and during the early years, the Congress also was not was they did not wanted independence from the during the early years of the Congress. The moderates also did not wanted independence from the British rule, and they basically wanted certain provisions for them, and certain things to be done for them. And Congress, Indian National Congress, was led for the first 20 years by a group of people which was called as moderates, because they were moderates in their policies, moderates in their objectives, and in the methods with which they wanted to achieve their objectives. So that is why they were called as moderates, and we were having a look at some of the demands of the moderates, that basically they did not want independence from the British rule, and the main objective was to get more representation of the Indians in the legislative assemblies and the legislative councils, and they wanted more Indians to be inducted in the civil service, Indian civil service, and they wanted the reduction of government expenditure and taxes, and they including the salt tax, they wanted the salt tax also to be removed. Then we also had a look that they demanded not only a larger share for the Indians in the legislative councils, but also greater powers for them. And then the nationalists, the moderates, also demanded a separation of the judiciary from the executive, so that the people might get free and fair justice. And they also laid a lot of emphasis on the primary education, that primary education might be spread among the masses. And we had done till here. So now from there we move on, and the nationalists, they also urged that agricultural banks should be developed, and this was to save the peasant, the farmers, from the clutches of the money lenders. Whenever the farmers and all, they were in need, and they did not have money, or the crops failed, or it was a bad harvest, and then to survive also they had to take money from the money lenders, and then these money lenders, they exploited them. They charged very high interest from them. And so uh, the nationalists, they urged for the development of the agricultural banks, so that loans can be provided from these banks to the peasants. And they also demanded the extension of the medical and health facilities, and the improvement of the police system also, so that the police system could be made popular, and it should work in an efficient manner. It should be able to perform the work well. Okay. Now, the national leaders, they also spoke in defense of the Indian workers. Now, Indian workers, they were compelled to go to South Africa to work there, and then in South Africa, Malaya, and Mauritius, they were compelled to go and work there, or to go there in search of employment. And at these places, the Indians, they had to suffer opposition and discrimination on the basis of color and race. And then the moderate leaders also wanted the public, the people of India, to know about the unjust nature, the way in which the Britishers were ruling over India and not treating Indians equally, discriminating them, exploiting them. So they wanted the people to know about all this. And now, from the beginning, the Indians who were like politically conscious, now they were attracted to certain rights like the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of thought, and freedom to associate, get together, form unions and associations. And so they published newspapers and wrote articles to prove that how British rule was leading to an economic ruin of the country. And they also criticized the Britishers in their speeches. And they now the moderates, they had faith in the goodness of the Britishers, and they felt that British, they had respect for the ideals of freedom and justice, and so they would also accept the demands of the Indians. And what they thought, the moderates thought that it was necessary. What was necessary was to make the British government aware of the feelings of the Indians. So that is why they were not opposed to the Britishers ruling here. They did not wanted independence from them for the first 20 years or so, and they basically wanted all these demands to be met. And because they also thought that the Britishers, they had respect for their ideals of freedom and justice, and they will also give it to the Indians if they present their these demands in front of the Britishers in a proper manner. Okay. Now, the Indian Councils Act of 1892, we saw that last time that it was uh, when this act came out, the Indians, they were not happy with it, because the number of the Indians in the legislative councils, it was increased, but the powers were not increased in the same measure. And so the Indian Councils Act of 1892, it failed to provide Indians with a proper role in administration in the country. And the moderates, they also did not get much concessions from the British government. And so a new set of leadership, it emerged, which was fiery and spirited. So we had leaders like Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. And so they parted ways from the rest of the people of the Congress, the moderate leaders, and they criticized the moderates for their politics of prayers. Means they were simply praying to the Britishers to grant them their prayers and their wishes. And these new set of people, they emphasized on the importance of self-reliance and constructive work. They wanted the people to be self-reliant, and they wanted to work for the construction of the country and a society, to remove the social ills, social evils from the society. And they wanted India to be dependent only on themselves and not be dependent on any other country. Okay, and so these three are together known as the Lal Bal Pal, and very famous as the radicals or the extremists. So these people were called as the radicals or the extremists. Radicals, those who wanted a complete change in the total system, and extremists, you just like moderates, they are neither here nor there, somewhere in the middle where they're extreme. It is on the higher side, so they were also called. In some books you will find them mentioned as extremists, or in some books they are mentioned as the radicals. Now, Tilak gave this slogan that Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. It became the source of inspiration for Indians. And now, these radicals or extremists, this new leadership, uh, they did not wanted to settle anything less than for complete independence. All right, now let's have a look at the partition of Bengal. Now in 1905, the then Viceroy Lord Curzon, he ordered the partition of the province of Bengal. Now the province of Bengal, it was a very um, rich province, all right, and very huge, very big province also. And now at that time, Bengal was the biggest province of India, and it included Bihar and even parts of Orissa. So West Bengal, Bangladesh, also combined it because it was a part of India before, and so it included such a large area of land, and so it was the biggest Indian province and also one of the richest Indian provinces. And now the Britishers, they divided Bengal and said that they were doing it for administrative convenience, that it was such a huge province, and so they were finding it difficult to administer and govern it. But the real reason of the partition of Bengal was to weaken the national movement in Bengal. Now, this national movement, this fight against Britishers, now it was very strong in Bengal. And here the people, the Hindus and the Muslims together, they were fighting against the Britishers. And so basically the Britishers, they wanted to weaken this national movement and sow seeds of disunity among the Hindus and the Muslims. And the partition was devised in such a manner so as to separate the Hindu majority areas from the Muslim majority areas. And now in Bengal, the national movement was very strong, and here the Bengali Hindus, they exerted a large influence on the local and the national politics. And so this partition, this made the people angry and mad, and so the streets of Calcutta, they were full of the cries of Bande Matram, and this later on became the national song of Bengal. And now the Bengal leaders, they felt that just taking out demonstrations and public meetings, now it will not have much effect on the Britishers, because they have already seen that the moderates were not able to achieve much through their petitions and demands and requests. And so they knew all that just demonstrations and meetings will not have much effect. And so they found two new ways of protest: Swadeshi and boycott. Anyone knows what was boycott and what was Swadeshi? Swadeshi, do you know the meaning of Swadeshi? Yes, class 8. Anyone here?
Ma'am,
Ma'am, that
Swadeshi means of one's own region or country.
Alright, Swadeshi means of one's own country. Swadeshi, alright, of one's own country. And boycott, anyone? Do you know what happened?
Ma'am, boy,
Hmm.
ma'am, boycott means in some or the other way banning some person or something from the normal social life.
Okay, alright, good. And so they came up um, the people of Bengal, they came up with two new methods of protest, which were boycott and Swadeshi. And so meetings having so many people, the masses, they were held all over Bengal. And here Swadeshi, or the use of Indian goods, basically what was it was first boycott, that you boycott everything British, everything foreign. And then now if you're boycotting, now that does not meant only clothes and other things, commodities, but it also meant like you boycott means not only clothes and all, but everything that came from outside or from Britain. And so now if you will boycott it, and it also meant schools and everything that was British, so it should be boycotted. And now if you boycott, then you need something else to replace it with. And so Swadeshi was just there to help, that you boycott things British and you use things which were made in your own country. So boycott and Swadeshi, it went hand in hand. And so meetings were held all over Bengal, and here Swadeshi, or the use of Indian goods, and the boycott of British goods, it was proclaimed, and people pledged and said that they will not use British goods and they will only use goods which were made in India. And so, in many places, there were huge bonfires of burning of foreign cloth. It was organized, and shops which were selling foreign cloth, now they were also picketed. Picketed, what it basically means, that people, they used to stand in front of these shops which were selling British goods, and they did not let them sell the British things, the British goods. And so the shops which were selling foreign cloth, they were also picketed. And in Deltaic, Andhra Pradesh, this movement was known as the Vande Mataram movement. Now, the Swadeshi movement, it opposed the British rule, and it encouraged the ideas of Swadeshi, self-help, self-help, and national education and the use of Indian languages. So, like I told you, so it was boycotting everything British, not only British goods, but British schools and British law codes. All right. So, and English language. So it was boycotting everything in British, and using things, and using Indian things, and like national schools, and not being dependent on the Britishers in any way, being dependent on oneself. So self help, and also the use of Indian languages in place of the English language. Okay. Now, the opening decade of the 20th century, now it also saw some other major developments. And in 1906, the All India Muslim League, it was founded by Aga Khan, the Nawab of Dhaka, and Nawab Mohsin ul Mulk. So this was an important development in the early 20th century. Then the this Muslim League, it supported the partition of Bengal. And because they thought that they were in minority in India, and so like now they could have a separate province for them, and maybe they would be able to achieve more political benefits from this. And so the Muslim League, it appealed to Viceroy Lord Minto, so that they could have separate electorates in which Muslim voters will elect only Muslims. So they wanted separate electorates for Muslims. Now, like we have elections, and so we have general constituencies, we do not have separate electorates. It is like all the people together, they vote for people living, people of all the religions together from one particular constituency, they vote for the candidates who are there in the election fray. And so it is not that the Hindus will only vote for the Hindus, or the Muslims will only vote for the Muslims. And so basically what they wanted, the Muslim League asked that the Muslims should be given separate electorates in Muslim populous areas, in areas where the Muslims were in more numbers, majority areas. And so that from those areas only Muslim candidates could be elected, so that Muslims would only vote for the Muslims. That is what they asked from the Muslim League. This All India Muslim League, it asked of the British government. Now, the differences between the moderates and the radicals, they widened. And we already saw that the moderates, in their objectives and in their demands, they were, and in the way they wanted these demands to be met, were very different. So the moderates were very different from from the radicals. The moderates did not wanted freedom from the British, whereas the first thing that the radicals they wanted was freedom from the British rule. And so that is what even Tilak said, that Swaraj, they did not wanted to settle for anything less than complete independence or a Poon Swaraj. And so the differences were so much in their objectives and in their demands and in the methods they wanted these demands to be met, that the differences between the moderates and the radicals, they grew, they widened. And in December 1907, at the Surat session of the Congress, there was a split in the organization. And so after the split, the radicals, they decided that they will work from outside, and the Congress, it was led by the moderate leaders. And the British, they decided to please the Muslims by passing the Indian Councils Act of 1909. And this act is also famously known as the Morley Minto reforms. And under this Morley Minto reforms, they provided for separate electorate for the Muslims to pacify them, to make them happy. Okay, now after the split, the Congress, it came to be dominated by the moderates. And the moderates, they soon realized that this act, this Indian Councils Act or the Morley Minto reforms, it did not provide proper representation of Indians in the legislative bodies. And so they understood that they were not able to achieve much through their ways. And so the two groups, they decided that they should reunite, means the moderates and the radicals. And so the two groups, they reunited in December 1915. And next year, at the Lucknow session of the Indian National Congress in 1916, the moderates and the radicals, they again put up a united front, means they again came back together at the Lucknow session of the Congress in 1916. Then the Congress, the Lucknow session of the Congress was the first united Congress since 1907. Means in 1907 at the Surat session, the Congress split. And so from there till 1916, year every year the Congress, they used to have their sessions, but they did not put up a united front. But it was first time after 1907, in 1916, that the Congress, they put up a united front. And at the Lucknow session, the Congress and the Muslim League, they also decided that they will forget their old differences, and they together presented their demands before the British government. And the Congress and the Muslim League, they signed the pact, the Congress League Pact at Lucknow in 1916. Okay, so I think we should stop here. Uh, yes, any queries, any questions, anything that you have not understood till here, class?
No, ma'am.
All
No,
understood?
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Okay, so I think we should stop here, and then when we meet on Wednesday, we will continue with the chapter.